Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Leviticus. Today we begin Leviticus chapter 25. And in chapter 25 we see the instructions for two special occasions that would occur in the life of Israel. One was the Sabbath year and one was the year of Jubilee. Let's begin with the Sabbath year. Let me start reading for you at verse 1. Now the Lord said to Moses at Mount Sinai, "Speak to the Israelites, say to them, when you enter the land I am going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years you will sow your fields. For 6 years you will prune your vineyards and gather your crops. But in the 7th year, the land is to have a year of Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. Do not reap what grows of itself or harvest the grapes of your untended vines. The land is to have a year of rest. Whatever the land yields during the Sabbath year will be food for you, for yourself, your male and female servants, the hired worker, the temporary residents who live among you, as well as for your livestock and the wild animals in your land. Whatever the land produces may be eaten." Now we've seen already in chapter 23 that every week you observe a Sabbath day of rest for the Lord. That was foundational to the life of Israel. And now we see that once you enter the promised land, the land itself is to have a Sabbath. Every 7 years, the land is to rest. You are not to plant it or to cultivate it. You are to give it a year of rest. Now, this would teach the Israelites a couple of things. First, it would teach them that the land belongs to God. One of the things the Israelites understood was that the promised land was God's land. He was granting it to them as a gift, as his provision for them, but the land belonged to him. And so every 7 years, the land itself was to have its rest, to be nourished and renewed and restored. The Sabbath year was a year of rest for the land. Now you might think, well, how would you eat during that year? If you take a year off from planting and harvesting, well, won't that produce famine? That's the second lesson they were to learn from the Sabbath year. You can trust the Lord to provide. That's what it says in verse 20. The Lord says, "You may ask, what will we eat in the 7th year if we do not plant or harvest our crops? I will send you such a blessing in the 6th year that the land will yield enough for 3 years. While you plant during the 8th year, you will eat from the old crop and will continue to eat from it until the harvest of the 9th year comes in." In other words, the Lord says, if you will trust me and give the land its rest in the 7th year, I will bless you with such abundance in the 6th year that you will have enough to last for the Sabbath year and beyond. I will provide for you. Now this demanded trust of the Israelites. They had to trust that the Lord would provide for them. And so every 7th year they were to take the year off. That is, not to plant, not to harvest, to give the land its rest, because the land belonged to God. And they were to trust that he would provide. They would see that the Lord is the one who would care for them. Now they've already seen that. He's providing the manna for them in the wilderness. He will for 40 years. He will provide the food they need every day in that wilderness journey. And when they come to possess the promised land, he will provide for them around the Sabbath year as they learn to obey his commands and to trust in his provision. Now, we know that in the history of Israel, they were sorely tempted not to observe the Sabbath year. Their trust would falter. And so it seems that many times they would not follow this command. They just couldn't bring themselves so often to obey the command of the Sabbath year. And in the years to come, when the children of Israel went into exile in Babylon, the prophets told them, one of the reasons God has sent you into exile is so that the land may have its Sabbath. You see, they would provide that Sabbath year every 7th year, and they didn't do it. So when they went into exile, the land had many years of Sabbath rest. God says, the land belongs to me, and it will have its Sabbath rest in the years that you are in exile, so that when you return from the exile, you will remember that I am the Lord. The land belongs to me, and I will make provision for you if you will trust. So this is the law of the Sabbath year. To remember that everything belongs to God and that he provides for his children if we'll just trust him. Hope you join us tomorrow for our next 5-minute Bible study. Tomorrow we'll begin to look at the year of Jubilee, which would occur every 50 years. We'll start looking at that tomorrow. Hope to see you then.